Great, Jamie. Thanks for being here. It's been a pleasure working with you on this search, and happy New Year. And
Happy
looking
New Year to
forward.
you.
Thank you, and looking forward to an exciting next phase in this leadership search. Want to just talk to you about a few things, and initially begin on what brought you to Windward. Maybe just talk about your background and what you've
Yeah,
been doing as a school leader, and how you came to this fine institution.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I just maybe want to start by saying I just appreciate everything you've done to help us get to this point. So we're really excited to have this be launched and get this out and find the right fit for our community. As you had mentioned, my name is Jamie Williamson. I'm the head of school and the executive director of the Windward Institute. So I sort of wear two hats here, two pretty sizable hats. I jokingly say sometimes I'm a recovering school psychologist. So I spent some years in public school evaluating children, problem solving on academic and behavioral concerns. And then after that, I actually had a chance to lead an independent school in Cincinnati, Ohio called Springer School and Center, where I was the principal of that program for 7 years, which is another LD school program. So my background really has been in LD education since the beginning of my educational journey. And so I love working with our kids, and I just really love helping them find ways to kind of unlock all the great strengths that they have. And I think it's one of the things we do really well. But so from Springer, I went up to Marburn Academy in Columbus, Ohio, to be the head of school there. And then I was actually sort of plucked from there, recruited to come up and be the head of school here at Windward. So it's been a wonderful journey. My timing was impeccable. I got here right before the pandemic started. So I got about 7 months of like regular life in New York before the entire world got a little bit interesting. And I think that's really been just a big sort of like impetus for where we are today. So I think that we have been a fairly low tech school for a long time. We've had like the background, the backbone stuff, like our internet and phones, copiers and things like that. But we're trying right now to kind of take a little bit of a different stance towards really integrating higher level assistive technology, even at a later point in our students' career. We thinking about educational technology and structural technology, and how do we do this work a little bit better moving forward, and have a much stronger backbone, and really prepare ourselves as the adults in the system and kids to navigate what is really clearly a tech oriented modern world these days.
And that's the world has definitely changed since the pandemic for sure. And but what some things haven't changed. Windward is a big school, three campuses, a lot going on, and I mean, I can imagine technology is going to really empower so much of your vision
Yeah.
because of the enterprise nature of the school. Talk for a
Yep.
minute about that, and sort of how Windward as a three campus school operates, and just and then if you can layer in how technology is going to be an important sort of
Yeah.
cornerstone of that.
We opened up the Manhattan campus about a kind of 7 or 8, 9 years ago. It was before my time, but like that allowed us to kind of put a big foothold down in the city. We've been in White Plains since 1926, so we've been up here for quite some time. So we started using some technology pre-pandemic because we've always seen ourselves as one school. We're not a Westchester school and a Manhattan school separately. We're really kind of one school. So there's lots of threads that kind of pull between, from our language arts program, our social studies approach, how we think about math, the consistency of our classroom, the fidelity of program, the research-based orientation, and all that work. And so we see ourselves as being this one larger school community that's really kind of all pulling in the same direction, with campuses that span some geographical distance. Mileage-wise, Westchester and the Upper East Side campuses are not that far apart, right? Like 16, 17 miles, but that's an hour on the train or an hour commute into the city. So it's pretty far. But we utilized technology early on in that transition to be able to bring our teams together. So we would have a team in Manhattan for our senior leadership team, and a team up here, or coordinators who were working on the academic side to help meet with folks. And we would do, some web calls, video calls like that to help connect those teams. But I do think during the pandemic, the needs for this kind of work, and the needs for us to be thinking about things a little bit differently, both in terms of recognizing that we had a lot of like programs and systems that weren't talking as efficiently, recognizing that we had a need to expand our bandwidth, to bring more devices into our school on the student side of this, to even think about how we were training the adults in the system on the programs that we did have to make sure the usage of those things was as high level and as efficient and effective as it possibly could be. So it's really turned us in a big way, and we've been trying to use this as an opportunity. Just as the pandemic was an incredible challenge, I think there was also some real opportunity there for us. So we saw this as a spot where we got to really bring in an LMS, which we didn't have before for our student body. So kind of some kind of learning management system to allow kids to interact and communicate from home and school. We're still, I think, in our infancy of that, but it's there and in place. We've also been working to just really do a lot more kind of integration and cohesion work from that side of things to help us kind of get there. And I think this idea of multiple locations means that we spend a lot of time using technology. I spend far more of my time on Zoom than I would have ever imagined prior to this. But it really allows us to have a feel of, we're always accessible and we can see each other and be in the process of that. But there's some of us like myself, our two associate heads, who spend a lot of time traveling back and forth. I try to make sure that when I'm on a campus, I'm really focused on the campus for the day. Sometimes I like to say that I kind of balance my time, but I really kind of go where I'm needed. And there are times when I need to be in the city, times when I need to be up in Westchester. But we try to bring and clarify all the things that make us Windward and pull those big things across all of our communities in both our three of our buildings in a big way.
The other big way is what you led with at the very beginning of this conversation. You introduced yourself as the executive director of the Windward Institute, and
Yeah.
that is another tremendous just program and department or division of the school of the institution.
Yeah.
And I know there's some upcoming projects that are technology related, but just for
Yeah.
those who don't even know much about it, other than what we shared in the document and on your website, talk about the why,
Yeah.
and then for you, again, where technology is going to play a huge role going forward there.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a great question. And I really appreciate it. I think that if someone has a background from a typical independent school sort of scenario, this idea of doing community outreach may look and feel very, very different. But we have a mission that says we are here to serve kids with language-based learning disabilities. And we have about 1,000 kids between the three campuses. And we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, like there's no way this is not true, is that there are far more kids in the greater New York area who need help in reading, writing, mathematics in such a big way. So we know that we're never going to be able to build enough buildings to kind of reach everybody we would like to be reaching. So we see this idea of outreach as such a critical part in delivering the core of our mission and really making our work more accessible across the masses. When I got here in 2019, in partnership with the former head of school and the board at the time, they created what was called the Windward Institute. And that was really focused on doing something that we've been doing for quite some time, but kind of really pulling it into a little different sort of scenario, and working to kind of push it out in a bigger way. But we've seen ourselves as one of the leading professional development trainers of teachers in our area for years. Even coming up here, I heard from people who were like, "Oh my God, I was at a Windward training 3 years ago for writing, and it was amazing," or "I did the PAF training here and it was amazing." And so we've been doing this work in training educators because we know from the research perspective that a well-trained educator is the most effective tool in all of this, right? Making sure our teachers know what to do with a child and their students when they're in front of kids. And so we've been pushing that work out, and that has been largely, historically at least, largely an in-person sort of direct instruction. We're an instructor in front of a class of like 30, in our program, in our building. During the pandemic, we went to Zoom, and we were actually able to really almost triple our numbers from a training standpoint during the pandemic. And now the dance floor has gotten quite crowded in terms of like online professional development. And there are a lot of competitors and some folks that we're surprised to kind of find out have moved into this space. And so we all of a sudden went from a real local sort of resource in this space, and I would say a local leading authority in this space, to an area where we were competing nationally all of a sudden, and actually internationally at times, with a lot of other programs. So we want to make sure we train teachers, and we're now sort of looking at how do we leverage technology to kind of scale up a product to have some sort of system where we can actually create online training modules for teachers with a classroom-based component, because we do feel that relational side of instruction is always important, and kind of pulling into good adult learning research on that. So we're in the middle of kind of working to build that out in a really big and important way. The Windward Institute also has a lot of great partnerships. So we actually work with the Haskins Lab out of Yale, the Yale Child Study Center. We actually have two neuroimaging labs on campus where we actually look at does our multisensory direct instruction approach have an impact on neurology over time? Does it change kids' brains as they come through our program? And so we've launched this a few years ago in partnership with them. We have a researcher from Yale come down and do some work with our kids, do some behavior measures, take a little EEG measurement for kids, both that are in two of our buildings. And then we also have started reaching into communities to kind of, again, to continue to serve more kids. We are the professional development partner for a public school in the South Bronx that's focused on kids with language-based learning challenges. And so we've been doing a lot of that work. It's the first school of its kind in the country. We've been working to help them get off the ground in such a big way, and with some incredible talent and partnership down there. We also work with folks like the Promise Project to help reach into some really high needs areas in the city to help bring some kids either to us and provide some tutoring for that. We also launched a reading screening program a few years ago to reach more kids and help families find out pretty quickly that there's a challenge that they need to work with a good tutor or potentially a school to address. And so we've been doing a lot of work to expand the ripples of our impact and make sure that we have a chance to just serve as many kids as possible. We believe the Windward Institute is such a critical part of that.
That's a lot, and that is so exciting. And it's just great to see the impact that the school is having, not just on the 1,000 or so kids, but on all the, it's just in a much further
Yeah.
reach there. Talking about impact, let's talk for a moment about this new role and the impact you're hoping that the CTO will have. It is a new position. It's in your executive cabinet.
Yeah.
Just for you, what's the key fundamentals for that position, and what are you looking for most in your next technology leader partner?
Yeah. Well, I think that, first and foremost, I think we want someone to come in and really think about who we are as a school, right? Because again, we're not your typical country day school, and no offense to those schools, but I think we have a different sort of, process, mission, and focus. So we want someone to kind of really understand what we're trying to achieve here, and then help us think through how do we leverage technology to be as effective and efficient at that at every level of the organization. So, like, how do we make sure that our work in the business office and our development office are technologically connected? How do we make sure the work in our admissions and enrollment management office is as technologically connected as it could be and is flowing as well as it could be? How do we make sure we're supporting the tech usage within our student body and our faculty body? How do we really think about building out some systems that allow us to reach and scale up a product a little bit to train more teachers? So we're looking for someone, I really believe, who can come in, understand who we are, bring a really interesting perspective to help us broaden how we think about this work, and maybe help us set a real clear direction for what we want technology here to look like for the next 15, 20 years. And really sort of, think about those team orientation, those team systems coming in to help support both our tech team, but also see themselves as supporting the entirety of the organization in such a big and important way. Which is why we wanted to have this set on the executive cabinet, so that way this person, as we're talking about, do we want to purchase new software and development to track our donor use? So how does that connect up to our family database? How does that connect up to our grandparents database? How does it connect to our mailing database? So if we're thinking about a change in our business office, how do we do that with really thinking through the entire ecosystem of all the technology that we have in the building, all the programs that we have, and the utilization of those programs? Because I think that at this point, we don't know what we don't know in some ways. And so, because this is such a new kind of area for us to kind of lean into, I also hope someone can be a little patient, because we have never been a school that sort of shifts with the wind. There are some schools that feel like they get distracted by the shiny thing on the horizon or the new thing that pops up at a conference. we really come back to this idea of evidence-based and how do we kind of do something really thoughtfully and intentionally and make sure that any move we make is going to have some positive impact. But always thinking about the idea of striving for excellence and that process and that growth towards excellence and that progress we want to make. But we want somebody to come in and help partner with us and have some expertise in the field, but see themselves as part of a team, and also pulling towards a much bigger mission than I think a lot of places would allow people to pull towards. That for me is one of the most exciting parts about working at a school like Windward.
Well, and I want to conclude with that. And I love how you don't focus on the shiny, because it's easy to get distracted by the latest and greatest. But at the end of
Yeah.
the day, you're serving students,
Hmm.
and you mentioned the mission. So the final question I'll just ask you is: clearly, this is a thread of education that matters so much to you, serving students that are not always served well by mainstream education,
Hmm.
students who are, just as capable, but have some sort of, a learning difference that might hold them back. What's been the why for you? Why did this particular sort of strand of education resonate so much with you that has become your lifelong passion?
Um, I'm a big believer that the hallmark of a strong community is how it takes care of its most challenged and most sort of fragile folks, right? And when I think about the school ecosystem, a child not learning to read or not learning to communicate and write their own sort of feelings and ideas down is such an incredibly tragic moment. And we know, like the research will tell us, that leads kids down some dark paths, right? And a lot of those paths, especially for Black and Brown boys, are really incredibly challenging. And so we want to make sure that we do everything we can to, because I believe reading's a right. I don't think it's a privilege. I think being able to communicate yourself and get a good education, one that values you as a student, is not a privilege. That's a right. And we want to make sure that we show up and do everything we can to have the kids who come in front of us, recognizing that no child ever, a parent, this may be a good place to start, Gabe, is that no parent ever has a child that says, I cannot wait to send my kid to Windward. There are lots of schools out in the world where that is the case. There are legacy families. They're both parents went to school there, or a grandparent has that connection. And we have some parents here who are alumni, but they were also hoping that they would never have to send their kid here. Not because the experience wasn't transformational or it wasn't deeply meaningful, but because they were hoping their child would never struggle. So kids and families come to us on the doorstep, and out of like frustration, out of failure, out of setbacks. And we get to be that lighthouse, that sort of space in a really kind of rough sea for a family. We get to open our arms, we get to bring families in, and we get to show them that these kids have strengths, that these kids are valuable to us, and that they have a tremendous amount to offer the world, and we help them unlock that potential. And that for me is when you see a child come through here who was a little bit, battered in the process of their educational journey, not feeling like they could, not feeling empowered, not feeling like they had even like worth in the classroom. They were trying to find other spaces to kind of find some self-worth. But they get here and they see that they're not being done to, they're being done with, and they're being empowered along the way. And they're seeing their efforts as transforming that progress in good partnership and collaboration with a teacher who they know cares about them. There's something really, and I hate to say magical, but I don't know how to describe it. When you see kids getting exactly what they need in the educational process and watching them sort of not just sort of like survive the educational system like many of us in our lives had to do, but thriving in a space where they really are the star of this work, and they see themselves as having so many great strengths. I just met with two kids today, and hearing their transformational journey, like it's really beautiful to see kids where they start versus where they finish up. And that's not just anecdotal. We actually have 20 some years of data of this, and we see that our program just absolutely transforms kids from a reading and writing standpoint. So I think that's really the why here, is that you get to show up every single day and know that no matter where the organization you are doing your work, you get to have a real direct impact on how we deliver our mission, which I'd like to think can get a lot of people out of bed in the morning. So it gets me out of bed.
That is very exciting, very touching, and I really appreciate those thoughts. And I know you will find somebody on the technology strand for whom this will be an exciting part of their why as well. So looking forward to working with you on the rest of the search. Thanks so much for your time,
Absolutely.
Jamie, and really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Look forward to meeting any prospective candidates. So
All right, thanks.
thanks.